House needs painting, grass needs mowing, where's he at?
Hi, this is Hank. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me your name and your number and I'll get back to you.
He's gone fishing.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Hank Parker. And what's the name of our show, Sarah Beth?
Off the Water with Hank Parker.
Off the Water with Hank Parker. Well, we've been, Sarah Beth got a little time off because I had Billy and Hank on the show. How'd you enjoy your time off?
It was pretty great. Did a lot of sleeping in.
Oh, sleeping in. That's a fun thing. Sarah Beth loves to sleep, but we're in the summertime now almost.
Yeah, almost.
80 degrees outside.
Feels great.
It's a little bit warm for me, but welcome. And boy, we have had a lot of emails, a lot of text messages, a lot of handwritten mail letters, all sorts of information and criticism and praise and it's all over the board about Forward Facing Sonar. So I've been accused of opening up a can of worms and then running and hiding.
Yeah, I've even gotten several DMs about LiveScope and people saying that you're a LiveScope hater. I was like, that is not true at all.
Well, let's just reopen that can of worms, and let's just go down the road. First of all, some people, they only get their exercise by jumping to conclusions. So
Not the truth.
I think that I got a bad rap in a lot of ways, and some of it I'll take responsibility that maybe I didn't do a very good job explaining my position at all. So we're going to start afresh.
All right, that sounds good.
Afresh. Is that a good word? Or
Start anew.
Start anew. That's better. Okay. We're going to start anew. And let me just tell you where I'm at. I fish for humminbird. I have since Tom Mann. Wow. That goes back to the early 70s. And it's amazing how time flies, but I believe, and I think we can research this and pretty much document it, Jimmy Houston and I wore the first jerseys on the fishing scene.
Oh, wow.
Humminbird put together a fishing team with Davey Allison, Bo Jackson, Pam Shriver, Jimmy Houston, myself, and the pro golfer Bobby Watkins. And so we got the very first, I know this to be a fact, we had the very first enclosed boat trailers, Humminbird, and with matching vans the first year, and then it later evolved to matching Suburbans. So we had the first, as far as I know now, we had the first wrapped boat.
Oh, wow.
And the first jerseys. So we go back a long way. So I have a long history with Humminbird. And I left Humminbird for a short period of time and actually went to work for Garmin. And I had a great relationship with Garmin. They were fun to work with. And I think I helped simplify some of the Garmin units because I just wasn't able to open up all these menus the way the guys that are so familiar with chips and all the technology. So I had to get them to make it simpler.
You needed the dumbed down version.
Yeah, dumbed down.
Layman's terms.
Layman's terms. Come on, girl. You can do it. So I actually contributed a little bit, I feel like, with Garmin. And Gary Burrell at that time was one of the owners. Ming, I can't say his last name, so I won't attempt to. Wonderful people to work with. And Humminbird had gone off, in my opinion, off the deep end. Jim Balcom and Tom Dyer, they sold the company to Telflex, and Telflex had different ideas. And they had a Hank Parker flasher that didn't work very well. And I would not put my name on it. So they gave me the option to either put my name on it or hit the door. So I've always had the philosophy that I'm not going to endorse something that doesn't work. My dad was extremely poor, and I always look at the consumer as if it were my dad, and I'm not going to sell him something that I think is a ripoff. I'm just not going to do that. So I ended up getting fired from Humminbird and went to work for Garmin, and then Garmin got themselves in a bind for LED screens were in short supply, and Garmin's business had just exploded with these little devices that GPS systems that you put in automobiles.
Okay.
And so there weren't enough screens. Their number one was aviation. That's their big deal, airplanes and all the instrument panels in airplanes, and that was the most profitable part of their business. The second was automotive, and at the tail end was the marine side. So they didn't have enough LED screens to make marine products. So I was kind of given the option to hang in there for a year, and then as the screens became more available, then I could go back and start endorsing and getting paid again. Well, while all that was going on, Johnson Outdoors bought Humminbird. And so I got a call. I've been with Minn Kota since the 70s. So I got a call from Johnson Outdoors and said, hey, we've just bought Humminbird and we'd like to have you back on board. Perfect timing. So Garmin wasn't upset that I was leaving because they had actually put me on a leave of absence. And so now here's an opportunity, and my deal with, I know that Minn Kota was dedicated to making the absolute finest troll motor possible. And so I asked at that time, the president of Minn Kota, was your philosophy the same for Humminbird? They said, absolutely. We're going to make Humminbird as dedicated just as we have Minn Kota. We're going to make the very best product that we can possibly design and engineer. So I said, I'm in. So that's how all that evolved. So now we come back to the can of worms.
Okay.
Humminbird is very much involved in developing forward-facing sonar called Mega Live. I personally love it. I enjoy it. I am not good at it. I am not at all good at it, but I enjoy the challenge. You never become better if you don't challenge yourselves in weak areas. That's a weak area. So I'm challenging myself to become better, and I like that. And I'm glad I'm not competing because I would be at the bottom of the list, no doubt about it. But I like working on that, and I have fun with it.
It's a learning curve, too. I mean, look at where it's come from, where you started to now, and bringing all this technology in. I'm sure it feels like very foreign for you.
It is. It really is, and that's a good way, very foreign. So with all that said, I am not a forward-facing sonar hater. I am not. And I believe the question that we should be asking ourselves as sportsmen, as people who are dedicated to the sport of fishing, what is the best direction for our sport to take, considering all the new technologies?
Right.
And, people get angry. And let me say, I appreciate this one guy is really over the top a little bit. What's he call himself?
I don't know.
Garmin Guru?
The Garmin Guru, yeah.
Yeah. And let me say, I appreciate his passion. He's really passionate about forward-facing sonar, and he's very knowledgeable. He knows his stuff. But we need to stay focused on the topic and not get sidelined and turn against one another and start making personal attacks to justify the topic that we're talking about. We need to keep everything relevant. And so I'm not angry at all. I appreciate this person. I appreciate their passion because they're really protective of what they believe in, and that's good. But a democratic society is a wonderful thing. But it only works if we all respect one another and we can all accept one another's opinion, even if it is in opposition of our own opinion. What does the Bible say, Sarah Beth, about the first commandment is love your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. The second is
love your neighbor like yourself.
Love your neighbor as yourself. Very good. You're past your Bible quiz for today. That's as hard for me. And I think if we're all honest, that's probably hard for everybody because we like self. I do. I'm very partial to old Hank and Hank's opinions. But we got to set that aside because my opinion and my personal preference may not be the best thing for the sport, or it may be. Let's lay it out on the table. Let's get a group of people on both sides of the fence. Let's respect, let's respect one another's opinion, and let's focus on the topic at hand. What is the best thing for our sport? Forward Facing Sonar is in its infant stage. At best, it's less than 10 years old. And I really think it's only been relevant for about the last 3 or 4. But I won't argue that point because people keep correcting me and saying, oh, no, it's been around a lot longer than you're crediting. Okay. But I think we'll all agree it's been around less than 10 years.
Agreed. I mean, I don't really remember seeing it too much really until like the past 5 years or so. You start seeing it more on social media.
How old are you, Sarah Beth?
20.
20. I used to be 20.
Back in your day. That's pretty hard to believe.
Man, I used to be. I fished when I was 20.
How long ago was that?
That was 51 years ago. Wow, yeah. That's a half a century plus a year. Wow, man, we're moving on now. Why did we go there? I don't know why we went there. Age always seems to come into play when we're talking. I don't know what the deal is. But I appreciate 20-year-olds. They think different than 71-year-olds. I can tell you that.
I can tell you that too.
I like that. And when you get 71, a lot of times you get a frog in your throat. And I don't know why that happens to me every time I do a podcast, but it does. And so we'll just have to live with it, but I apologize. So here we are with our can of worms, and we're trying to sort this thing out the best. And I don't want to sidestep any of the hard questions. I'm willing to take them head on. And I'm willing to take personal criticism. And perhaps I didn't make myself as clear as I should have, and I've had people respond and say, well, wait a minute. If you don't hate Forward Facing Sonar, tell us, where do you stand? Okay. All right, here's where I stand. I enjoy it. It's a challenge. But I see it at completely rearranging our sport. I said earlier, changing our sport. Let's just go with rearranging. It is a definite threat to traditional fishing methods.
Right.
Is that good or bad? I don't know. Let's lay it out on the table and let's let people decide that are a lot smarter than me, or let's look at it from a democratic perspective that we would respect one another. And let me tell you something. When I say democratic perspective, I'm talking about a democratic idea. I'm not talking about the Democrats of America. I'm not talking about the Democratic Party. Because if you know anything at all about me, I am not at all for abortion. I'm not at all for socializing America. So I stand firmly on my own principles from a political standpoint. So when I say democratic, I'm talking about the philosophy of we the people coming together and decide what is best for us as a group.
Right. I think people take things to an extreme. You'll say one thing, like you lay out a whole sentence, they'll take one part of that sentence and run with it instead of listening to the whole rest of the sentence that you're saying. Just because you are questionable about something does not mean you hate something. I feel like there's been a lot of miscommunication on that end from some of the messages that I've gotten. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Nobody said that they hate anything. Like you were saying, you enjoy it leisurely, but what does it mean for competition?
And I thank you for that. She has defended me, by the way. She answers a lot of these emails, and we discuss back and forth. She said, "How will you answer this question?" And a lot of people have taken things completely out of context. Some people have taken it partially out of context, and then I'm going to take responsibility for not making it perfectly clear. And so let me just stay right off the top. I listen to a lot of people in opposition. I listen to a lot of people that are pro, and I listen to a lot of people that are somewhere on the fence or neutral about Forward Facing Sonar. Here's where I am. I personally enjoy it. I think Humminbird has done an incredible job developing Mega Live. I think that it stands a really good chance of completely rearranging the sport of bass fishing as we know it. Now, I see that somewhat as a threat, but perhaps because I'm 71 years old, I'm overreacting, but perhaps I'm not. Let's lay it out on the table and let's discuss what is the best thing for the future of our sport. I'm very much, you can see I got a Huckleberry Apparel shirt on. That's all about trying to help high school fishing kids raise funds to be able to support themselves. I'm so pro high school fishing. I'm so pro kids. I have grandkids that love this sport. I want it to be as good for them as it has been for me. So preservation, conservation is all important. So I don't want to be guilty of being old fogey and not accepting change, because change is a sure thing. Nothing stays the same. We're in a moving world.
Absolutely.
And I see that. You know, I remember when Franco Harris was the hottest running back in the NFL, and Jim Brown, who was one of the pioneers, one of the greatest running backs in the history of the NFL, challenged Franco in a sprint, in all sorts of things, he was jealous, I think, that Franco was getting all this attention, and he felt like he was a better athlete. Well, I would say to Jim Brown, you had your day, and you were awesome, and you set your records, but let it go now. It's Franco's turn. And he's doing an awesome job. So don't be critical of him and don't be trying to challenge him. So I had my day in the sun. I had my years, and I'm very appreciative for them. I'm not jealous, or nor do I challenge anybody of this era that I can compete with them. I'm going to tell you, these kids would kick my hiney today, and I know that. And I'm not going to sit here and say I could compete against them. I'm not there. I had my day, and I realize, hey, I'm out in the pasture, and these kids are doing an awesome job, and I'm in awe. I watch them, and I'm impressed. So I'm not jealous. I'm not competitive. I don't want you to think that I could go out on the tournament circuit today and compete against these guys. I'm not saying that at all. But I care. I care about the future of the sport. I care about it for my grandkids. I care about it for everybody. I care about it for the high school fishermen. And I just want to sort it out and get it right. Now, I don't know if you've watched The Bilge. The Bilge is one of the greatest podcasts, I think, going on the topic of fishing. The Zaldanes do an awesome job. And I watched as they interviewed these fishermen, and the purpose of the interview was to determine how much all the electronics that they had on their boat that contributed to Forward Facing Sonar, how much all that cost.
Right.
And that was the objective. But what I saw was almost every single guy that they interviewed with all this equipment apologized. They said, well, and he asked them, would you consider yourself a scoper, a scoper. And they said, well, I do it because I have to do it. It's not what I like to do. Wait a minute. I heard that over and over and over and over again. It's not what I want to do. It's not what I like to do. It's not what I grew up doing, but it's what I have to do to be competitive.
Right.
I don't like that.
Right.
I don't like that. I don't like somebody saying, I'm forced to do this. It's not what I want to do, and it's not fun for me. What's fun for me is going up and fishing the milfoil beds and punching grass and doing all the things that I love to do, but I can't win doing that. Therefore, I am shackled to a forward-facing unit in order to be competitive.
Right. I just wanted to backtrack a second there, too, when you were saying, you're old, you're like, I might not be relevant, but I disagree on that aspect because you were there when the sport was just starting out. Because before that, you were saying it was just people would catch fish just to fry them and eat them. It wasn't a sport. So I feel like you should have some leeway. I know you love fishing. I mean, even outside of tournaments, every summer you're fishing. I mean, any chance that this man can get to get out of the house and get on the water, and everyone's like, well, is Pawpaw home? No, he's out on the water. So I feel like you should hold some sort of weight to your opinion because I know you genuinely love the sport.
Thank you, and I do appreciate that, and I honestly do. I go fishing, I get excited. I get excited when I get to go fishing, and I've fished all my life, and I love it. It means a lot to me, and I've said a long time ago, fishing's not about tournament fishing. That's just a small segment. Tournament fishing's wonderful, and I made a living, and I'm grateful for that, and I love tournament fishing. But that's not what fishing is all about. Fishing starts when you're a little kid and you watch a bobber and you hook a red worm. Fishing's about camaraderie. Fishing's about fellowship. Fishing's about family. Fishing's about a release. Fishing is about reality. Fishing is about creating an environment that is friendly to be able to communicate with your kids. Fishing is a way of life in a lot of ways. And so I don't want to make out as if it is all about being competitive because that's just a teeny sliver of what fishing really is.
Right.
And so I appreciate, when I started my television show, everybody thought I was just going to expand on knowledge as a tournament fisherman. And I didn't do that. Man, I incorporated family, and I had fun. And I talked about, and I tried not to instruct too much. I tried to make instructions fun. And I didn't want to do a seminar every time I did a fishing show. I wanted you to appreciate nature and the ducks and the geese and the bald eagle and the deer on the bank and all the things that just incorporate a great experience on the water. So that's what fishing is to me. But nevertheless, it is being driven for the most part by the professional angler. Mm-hmm. He has the greatest influence on what lures you're going to buy, mm-hmm. what electronics you're going to buy, what brand of outboard you're going to buy,
right?
What brand of boat you're going to buy. So all of that is a big deal because you have all that influence.
Right. I mean, that's why they're called influencers.
Yeah, that's true. And so what has happened is the technology has gotten so extreme that it has rearranged everything in just 3 or 4 years.
Rapidly.
Yeah, really quick. And so my question is, where is all this going to land? It's a moving target, and it's going full speed ahead. Where's it going to land, and how much more influence is it going to have on rearranging the sport of fishing as a whole?
Right.
Now, let me tell you something that I've learned on my own, and I'm guilty, and I apologize, but I made it easy for my grandkids to hunt. We put out redneck blinds, enclosed fiberglass blinds with comfortable office seats, and it became legal to bait. I'm very much involved in a product called Come Here Deer, which is an attractant for deer. And we made it so convenient And we started taking them when they were just little knotheads. And they could move around in the blind because they're concealed. We did not teach them how to hunt. We did not teach them how to hunt. We taught them how to go climb up in a comfortable blind, sit in an office chair, and look at a bait pile. That's not hunting. So my grandkids, it dawned on me one day, I tried to do them a favor by introducing them to the outdoors, but I actually did them a disservice because I've got them and they don't know how to hunt.
Life of luxury.
Yeah.
I am a victim. I've been personally victimized.
Well, I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. We're going to hunt. We're going to go climb a tree. We're going to go scout. We're going to go find a scrape on the ground. We're going to go find where deer are feeding on white oak acorns or whatever it is that they're feeding on. We're not going to sit on a food plot. We're not going to sit in a redneck blind. We're actually going to go out into the woods and we're going to learn how to hunt. Now, Boone and Cade are the two boys that I have that literally love to hunt. And they're good hunters. But we had to train them. We had to go back and erase all that sitting in a comfortable office chair, sitting in a blind. Man, let's go hunting. Let's get out into the woods and let's scout and let's learn what hunting's about. We're there right now with fishing. It's really parallels pretty close. Now, maybe not exactly, but are we going to teach our kids the fundamental and the basics on how to analyze water? People ask me all the time, what do you do when you go to a strange lake? Never been there before, all right? Consider the time of the year. Time of the year, the only reason that's important is it pre-spawn or post-spawn.
Right.
That's important. So you establish that. Then you look at water temperature. Then you look at the height of the water. Has the water been rising or falling? And then you start looking for bait because other than the spawning season, fish prefer food, number one, cover, number two. Mm-hmm. So you got to find the food, the bait. Birds will show you where that's at. You learn that as you go along. Your electronics will show you where bait is at. You find bait pods. You can find fish. That's changed some with Forward Facing Sonar because it gives you way more detail. You actually target on finding the bait pods and finding the fish electronically, and you discount all the other factors that's involved for the most part. Now, not always, and that may not be totally accurate, but it's the way I see it. So now, if you take your kids and you say, guys, we're going fishing, and all we're going to do is target big fish, and we're going to do it with Forward Facing Sonar. Forget the fact that the water's been rising and falling. Forget the fact that the spawn is history. Forget the fact that the water clarity is different in the upper part of the lake than it is the lower part of the lake. I always like to go to the upper part of the lake because it's easier to catch fish in off-colored water than it is clear water on artificial lures for the most part.
Right.
So I would always, back in the old days when we fished tournaments, we'd charter an airplane the day before practice, and we would go up and we would look at all the fingers and all the coves and all the rivers and the creeks and the tributaries that ran into the lake, and we would mark it on our maps. I was always looking for that off-colored water because I would do better with the type fishing that I like to do and targeting structure in off-colored water versus clear water. So that was a factor, but now that varied. If the water was extremely cold, I would prefer the clear water because fish are far more lethargic and it's more about sight fishing. So I'd be fishing more like jerk baits and more transparent baits. So if it were cold wintertime, then I didn't want the off-colored water. I wanted the clear water. If it were warmer weather, I wanted the off-color water. Well, throw all that out the window. That doesn't matter anymore if it's all about finding bait pods with Forward Facing Sonar and finding the fish and feeding them a lure.
Right.
That bothers me, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm old school. I don't know that. Let's put that on the table and let's get a lot of people with a respectful attitude. You've got to respect my opinion, but I have the obligation of respecting your opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was going to say, if you guys wanted to send in any questions or really opinions you have on the live scope, you could DM all of our socials, and we'll get to them and we can address them if you want to do that and keep the debate.
Well, and I think that's good. And I think we need to come together with Major League Fishing, with BASS, with the pioneers, with the sanctioning organizations, with the anglers themselves. And I'm not asking to be a part of that panel at all. Perhaps I don't deserve to be a part of that panel. I'm not trying to claim that I do. I'm just saying I'm an individual that's been there. I've been here from almost the foundation of organized sports. I remember Bobby Murray in that first Bassmaster Classic out at Lake Mead in '71, and I've been to a bunch of them. And I care. And I think we need to figure this thing out because it's really complex. And I hear a lot of negative. I hear some positive. And I hear a lot of people saying what was disclosed on the bilge. It's not what I want to do. It's what I have to do. I have to do this to be competitive. Well, I don't like that. That really does bother me because I don't want anybody participating in this sport because they have to. It's a privilege. It's an opportunity. It's wonderful. It's a great experience. So don't get yourself in a position where you have to do what you don't want to do to be competitive.
Absolutely. I mean, what's the point of doing it at that point? I mean, other than to like make a paycheck. I get what they're saying. I mean, I'm sure they have these other companies that we need you to use XYZ in the tournament to be in that group, to be considered a professional. So, I mean, it makes sense from that aspect, but it is kind of sad that they're not fully enjoying it.
Yeah, and that part bothers me. It's hard to recruit people to do something they don't want to do. It's a lot easier to recruit if people enjoy what you're offering to them. So if we're going to offer Forward Facing Sonar as a platform to be competitive, but realizing up front it's not fun, it's going to be harder and harder to get people to engage in our sport from a high school perspective to kids in general. So I think we've got a real dilemma. And I think it's probably bigger than some people think it is. I think it's going to be critical that we lay it out on the table and we get some serious people involved that respect one another, and we determine the direction that this sport should go to be the most beneficial for the mass, for the kids, for everybody involved. And that's the whole purpose of a democratic society, is to let's do what's fair for all people. Yes, it may not be the best thing for this class or that class, but overall, the blend is more favorable for the mass of people. That's where we need to be today with our sport of bass fishing, competitive-wise, because how important it is for setting the trends in the marketplace for the general public. So whether you accept that responsibility or you don't, the truth of the matter is you carry a lot of influence when you're a professional angler. You carry a lot of responsibility to the sport itself. You carry a lot of responsibility to conservation and for doing what is right. So whether you want that title or that responsibility, it doesn't matter, you got it. And so we got to deal with that. And each individual has a responsibility of doing what he feels is the right thing to do. And we need to collect as much of the data as we can possibly collect. We need to sit down in an organized method of respect for one another's opinion, whether we agree or disagree. Sarah Beth, I can't remember the year, but Ray Scott and Helen Sevier, whom I deeply respect both, made a ruling for the Bassmaster Classic that you could not wear a patch on your shirt unless that company sponsored the sanctioned event. Well, Stren was the line for bass. Berkeley Trilene was my sponsor. And man, they were a great sponsor for me. And I had Trilene on my shirt. So now I'm told I cannot fish the Bassmaster Classic with a Trilene patch on my shirt. Well, that's wrong, because that's the way I make a living. And so all the guys came together, and Jimmy Atkins, Randy Fight, and Denny Breyer all said they were going to fish because they all had sponsors that aligned with bass. I talked to Denny personally, and Denny said, Hank, you've made it. You've already won a classic. I worked hard to get here, and I'm trying to make my mark. I completely understood that. Yes, we all wanted everybody, all 40 contestants, to say, no, we're not going to participate if you're going to make that ruling, because it prohibits us from making a living.
Right.
So we got to make a stand. But Randy Fight, all of his sponsors, all his patches on his shirt aligned, and so he was totally legal. Jimmy Atkins, same thing. Jimmy Atkins was a great angler who got killed in New York on the Hudson River just 2 years after that. Very tragic, very sad. But Jimmy asked me, he said, do you think that all these guys are going to blackball me if I say I'm going to fish? No, I don't. I know I'm not, and I don't believe the others will. So even though it was a sharp disagreement on how we should handle this, we all came together and we all respected one another. And people that maybe didn't see eye to eye on other topics, we all came together on this one and said, hey, if we allow them to rule over us and say we cannot have sponsors outside of the sanctioning organization sponsors, then we're limited and we can't make a living. I had Christian friends that said, well, you're out there in those bass tournaments gambling. You're putting up money to win money, so you're doing nothing but glorified gambling. And that's not at all what I was doing. I was trying to establish myself to get sponsors to make a living. So prize money was not a big factor. I mean, that was a bonus. The factor was the ability to have an influence on the public and to be able to have those patches that paid money and fed your family.
Right.
Well, now we're told we can't do that. So we came together, and Ray called it a boycott. It was not at all a boycott. For me, it was the fact that I'm just not going to fish if that's the rules, because I can't make a living following the rules. And so in midstream, after we've already competed all year and qualified, now you come up and say we cannot represent our sponsors that paid us all year long to get to the big Super Bowl of bass fishing, and now we can't wear our patches.
Right. I would have been like, don't you think you should have said that, like, maybe earlier this year?
Yeah.
Let us know.
Well, then years later, FLW came down that same path, and they said the same thing. But the difference was FLW was paying enough money that you could make it on prize money. I mean, they were paying gigantic, 40th place was like $20,000 or $30,000 in their big Forest Wood Cup. So it was a different set of circumstances. But the point I'm making is, in all that controversy, we came together. I respected Ray. Ray respected me. I respected Helen. Helen respected me. We totally disagreed. We completely disagreed. So in that disagreement, we just said 37 of the 40 anglers, we're not going to participate because it's going to change our life and it will not work for us, so we're not going to be there. Well, they turned around and they withdrew. They retracted, and everybody came together and fished. There was never fallout. There was never any hate. There was never slander. There was never personal attacks. We understood where they were coming from. We just disagreed. They understood where we were coming from. They just disagreed. Right. But collectively, we worked it out, and the sport thrived and went on. Here we are again. It's a very touchy subject. It's edgy, and there's people that's so passionate on one side or the other. But even with that, we just got to figure out how we can come together and respect one another and resolve the issue. At least set into play something that's going to dictate where we're going with this thing. Because regardless of whether you agree or disagree that this is new technology, I think yet all, if we're honest, saying none of these companies are going to stop innovating. They're going to keep, and it's going to get crazier and crazier and crazier. And maybe that's a bad word right there. Maybe I should not have said it. It's going to get way more advanced, way more advanced. Way more technology is going to give way more information on that screen to the angler. Is that good or bad? I see danger, but maybe I'm looking at it as a 70-year-old.
Right. I mean, that's a very valid question, though. I mean, there becomes into play overfishing as well. I mean, ecosystems in the lakes, what is it going to do if it's so easy to catch a fish? I mean, who's to say that the bass aren't going to adapt to that and start behaving differently?
That is awesome that you bring that point up. I had neglected that, overlooked that. But there was a time, and I'm going to be honest with you, I learned this through Forward Facing Sonar. I learned a lot. But there was a time when I thought fish left an area. When a front would roll in or you put too much pressure on them, I felt like they just left that area. Well, what they have done that you can clearly see on Forward Facing Sonar, for the most part, and there's always exception, but for the rule, they just pull out. They just get too much pressure on them or the weather changes, they just pull out and suspend. They get in the middle of the cove, they get way out in front of the boat dock, or they get out in front of the trees, the structure that you're normally fishing, they're not there. They just pulled out. It's a refuge. It's a place that they're pretty much unmolested. And now, man, there's no hiding place. There's no relief. There is no refuge. Man, they cannot hide. They can swim, but they cannot hide.
Right.
And that is another issue. There are, especially when it comes to speck fishing, sac-a-lait, white perch, crappie, whatever you want to call that fish that's wonderful to fry up and put on a plate. I love them. Man, you can wipe them out. I mean, you can literally, people go out and that normally would not catch a limit. Man, they catch a limit almost every time they go. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Maybe we need to reduce the limit, and that's an option. But all I'm saying is it's changed everything. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's get some very smart people together that respect one another and say, okay, here's where we're going. Here's where technology is obviously going to go. It's not going to stop. Let's regulate and put some rules. There are guys already now putting transducers for forward-facing sonar all over their boats, out the back, out the sides, couple out the front. Now, it's getting crazy to me. It's getting very advanced, perhaps, to others. But to me, that's dangerous. That to our sport, that it's going to become nothing but looking at them on a scope, looking at them on a screen. So I don't know. It's hard to say what the answer is, but to say it's not a problem is wrong. There is a problem. There is a change of direction. There is need, in my opinion, to figure out where this thing is going. Let's put clamps on it. Let's get it arranged where we're going to have a great sport to protect and people want to participate. They don't have to do this to be able to be competitive. Let's keep that out of the sport. I go fishing because I love it. I don't go fishing because I have to. I don't go fishing because I need to. I go fishing because I want to.
Right. I can testify to that. He's telling the truth.
So I want people to want to go. And I think it's going to be a lot easier to recruit our kids if it's something they want to do rather than something that they have to do. And so that's where I'm at on Forward Facing Sonar. And for people to take that out of context and say I'm a Forward Facing Sonar hater, that's not true. I think I've made it as clear as I know how to make it on where I stand. I think we've looked at the problem, and I will not call any names, but I work with the sanctioned organizations of the sport, and behind closed doors, they all agree that there's issues. To say problems may be an overstatement, but to say there are issues. There are people on both sides of the fence that's very passionate in one direction or another. That causes a division. It forces the sanctioning organizations into making decisions and rulings that is fair for both sides. They don't know what that is, to be honest. I've talked to both sanctioning organizations, and they're much in the same position as I am. There's issues here, but how do we go about resolving them? What is fair? Where should the future of the sport go? Can we even think about controlling that? Is there a way to regulate that is fair to all sides and fair to the electronic companies that have worked so hard to develop this technology? How do we rule on this, and how do we be fair? That's why I'm glad that I'm not in your position. I'm thankful that I'm sitting on the sideline. But I do have a responsibility, as all other professionals do, as a television host, as a personality that is involved in the sport. I do have a responsibility of being a good steward. I have a responsibility of being faithful to the sport itself. And so it would not be right for me to know what I know and not speak up. So I know that there's issues. I know that it's causing a division. Unity is strong. Unity is what makes things work. When people are discontent, when people are against one another, it creates a controversy that is not favorable for growth. I know that, and we don't need to be there. So let's come together and try at least to resolve it. People that are for gun control, man, they're passionate about it. People that are against gun control, they're passionate about it. It's a great divide. It's hard to find common ground. And that's a issue that's been going on in America now for 50 years plus. I don't want to be there 50 years from now with this thing creating a division in our fraternity, in our sport. I don't want that to be the case. I want to get it resolved. So I don't know how we'd resolve it. All I know is we need to lay it on the table, and let's get a group of people that respect one another, and let's figure it out.
I say that sounds like a plan. Lay out all the facts, just how it is, and what are we going to do about it?
And there's always going to be speculation. There's always going to be people that you just don't have a crystal ball to see what the future holds completely. So it's not something that you can say absolutely is right. You may have to amend as you go along. You may need to make some rules and realize, well, we didn't go far enough. So you make new rulings, or you may make some rules and you say we went too far, so you adjust that to be fair and to make it work. So that's where we are on Forward Facing Sonar. And if you've got any of the questions that people ask me,
I'd say send them to me, send them to Hank.Parker on Instagram, Hank Parker on Facebook, and we'll get to it. we'll just make a whole list of it. Send in your comments and we can address them for, our opinions anyway, for, our knowledge that we have.
We got a lot before, and I couldn't possibly answer them all. And I had other podcast hosts summarizing what I said and how I said it. Some of it was accurate and some of it was inaccurate. So go by what I've said and keep it in context, and you'll understand my position. But I'm not against anybody, and I'm not for everything. Aaron Tippin song, you got to stand for something or you fall for everything. I get that. I think that was well said. I definitely stand for the betterment of the sport, and I definitely want to do what is the best thing for the majority of the people, whether it supports my opinion or agrees with my opinion or not. So we're in a state of controversy that needs to be resolved, and we need to come together with respect for one another and get the job done. That's our responsibility to the future. It's our responsibility to the kids that's involved in the sport, and we need to keep that going. And while we're talking about that, I want to give a plug to Huckleberry Apparel. The whole purpose of me joining Huckleberry was to get these high school kids in a position to fund themselves. And so we're going to put a link at the end of this podcast where you can go and look and see if what they have to offer to allow you to fundraise for your fishing team, if it's something you want to be a part of. But we need every single high school team to at least go to that link and look and say, does this fit what we're trying to accomplish? Mm-hmm. Because we have worked really hard to get this thing where you can fund yourself, and it's a program that's working. And we've got a lot of people signing up, man. We got a lot of teams, but I want every team. I don't want to leave one team behind. 2 Peter 3:9 says, the Lord is not slack, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish, but all come to repentance. Now, that's the most important thing in the entire world. Nothing else compares to that. But I want all teams. I don't want anybody to be left behind, left out. I want you to go to Huckleberry Apparel, look at this program, and see if it's something you want to be a part of. If it is, sign your team up. Let's go. And be self-funding. So Huckleberry Apparel is helping us. They're helping with the podcast. So I don't lay anything out. I don't want to hide anything. But the sole reason I'm involved with Huckleberry Apparel was I found a company that was willing to give up enough profit out of their sales to make this fundraising effort possible and to make it significant. I mean, you sell a hat, you make 30% of the profit of every single thing Huckleberry sells. They absorb all the cost, they absorb everything, and they cut the profit where they divvy out 30% to these high school teams. So you can make significant money and support your own team. So jump on that. Look at it, and we'll put this link up, and you can check it out.
It'll be in the description box for both YouTube and Spotify. So if you just want to click down below, there'll be a link to Huckleberry and then a link to the high school fishing forum, separate.
That's good. I don't know how to do any of that. You know, all this technical stuff is way above my pay grade. But since we've started this podcast, my whole objective was to talk about the history of the sport. You know, we started out, that very first podcast that we did, and we talked about the old plug spoon that Buck Perry developed way before the flasher, the old Humminbird flasher that showed the depth of the water. We talked about that. That's the foundation. Mm-hmm. We talked about Blake Honeycutt, who was my personal hero. He was a Ranger rep, and he was a great fisherman and a big string of fish. He was on the cover of Bassmaster magazine with 138 pounds at Eufaula, Alabama. talked about Bobby Murray, another hero of mine. Bobby could catch fish in clear water, cold water, muddy water, deep water, shallow. It didn't matter. He was versatile. And that's what I admired so much about Bobby. He caught them all the time. And so he became a mentor, a guy that I wanted to follow and become like him, be able to catch fish and all. Those are all the things that I want to talk about. I never really wanted to get into the controversy of anything, and certainly not Forward Facing Sonar. But again, it's my responsibility, and I had to do it. I can't just bypass that and leave it alone when I see a threat and I see division in the sport. So I had to go there. But it's my objective to get this behind me. And I was accused of opening up a can of worms and running and hiding. So I don't want to do that. And I agree. That's what it looked like. I had my boys on, and we talked about our NASCAR days. We talked about the hunting show days. And we talked about family. All that's important to me. So there was a couple weeks there that I just stayed away from this particular topic. And people felt like I was running from it, and I didn't want to address it. So I think we cleared that up. I'm not scared to take the tough questions. I'm not running. But that's not what I want to do. And that's not why I started this podcast. I started this podcast because I wanted to tell the history of the sport. You know, I was sitting around with some professional anglers that are just awesome. I mean, they're fish catching machines, but they did not realize at the first couple of Bassmaster Classics, the anglers didn't even know where they were going. It was only 24 anglers. They didn't know that. And they didn't know it was a $10,000 first place, winner take all. Second place got nothing. They didn't realize any of that. And they didn't realize that you got on an airplane, you didn't even know where you were going. You were allowed 5 rods and reels. You were allowed 10 pounds of tackle. And they gave you an envelope that when you got 10,000 feet or whatever the elevation was that they turned the little fasten seatbelt sign off, you're allowed to open that envelope and see where you're going.
Sounds like deployment. You don't know where you're going to end up.
Yeah, it's like deployment.
Getting shipped off.
That's pretty cool. Well, and that's the way it was. Well, guys don't even know that. Man, we need to know that. That's history. How awesome is that? And look where we've gone. Look where we've come from, and look where we're at. Let's not mess up. Let's keep momentum on our side. Let's don't make our sport something that you have to do. Man, you don't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning whistling if you're not happy. And if you're going to go do something you don't want to do, you're not going to be happy.
If I have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to be happy. I'm going to tell you that.
I love it. I get excited. I'm a turkey hunter, so 5 o'clock right now is actually sleeping in a little bit. We've been getting up at 3:45, but it's I love it, man. I get up. I'm fixing to go to New York smallmouth fishing, and I'm like a kid in a candy store, man. I am so pumped up I can't hardly sleep. Leaving in just a day or so, and get to go catch those big smallmouth. It gets daylight up there at 4:30.
At 4:30?
4:30 a.m. It's daylight. So I always like to fish from daylight to dark. Well, they don't get dark till about 8:30.
You ever heard of blackout curtains?
Blackout curtains.
No daylight.
Oh, it's a pretty good idea. But anyway, that's where this podcast is going. That's where I want to go, and I want to have some guests on. I want to talk to Bobby, and I want to talk to Paul Chamberlain. I want to talk to Dance, and I want to talk to Roland, and I want to talk to these pioneers that are the foundation of the sport. Rodney Honeycutt, Blake's son, I'd like to talk to him. You know, Blake passed away 3 years ago. I was at the Bassmaster Classic in Greenville, South Carolina. It may have only been 2 years ago, and Blake passed away the day after that classic, or the final day maybe. And I really, all my life, I've just, my whole adult life, I've just loved Blake, and I'm so sad that he passed away before we started the podcast, because I would have loved to heard some of his stories. He was a delightful human being and had a perspective of the sport that was different than most, and it would have been so great to have captured that. I would have loved to have had Tom Mann. I wish everybody knew Tom Mann like I knew Tom and could appreciate the pioneer spirit, the humor, the warm human being that he was. He would be on my podcast. But the very first guest I would have on my podcast, if he were still with us, would be Forrest Wood. Forrest Wood cared more about this sport. He did more for this sport than anybody I know. And so I started my podcast a few years too late. I would have loved to have had these guys on there where you could see who they were as characters. You could understand a little bit more about them, and then you'd have deeper appreciation for what they put together. And I ask myself often as I engage in this sport, and I try to be the person that I should be, I ask myself, what would Forrest do?
Get it made on a bracelet. What would Forrest do?
Yeah, not Forrest Gump. What would Forrest Wood do? Yeah. Because he was a man of wisdom. He was a man of passion for the sport, and he always dealt with issues and would leave the emotion out of it. You know, I'd get so fired up and I'd get real emotional, and Forrest would say, Hank, wise business decisions are never made out of emotion. You have to take whatever the subject or topic you're evaluating and evaluate it for what it is, and don't be emotional about it. Remove that, because you can make some really bad decisions, because sometimes when it's emotional, you really push for it to go your way when you really need to do what is right for that particular situation. Forrest was a very brilliant, wise man that loved this sport and helped build it brick by brick. And so I'm obligated to him. He supported me and got me in the position that I'm in today. And so I'm obligated to him to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
So what would Forrest do?
What would Forrest do?
I wish he was here, because he would have a better answer than probably anybody else does. But he's not, and so we got to go on. We got to use the influence that we have and the experiences that we've had to become the person, the best person we can be through his influence. So we appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast, and I hope we've cleared up a few things. What do you think, Sarah
I think
Beth?
so. I don't think you could have said it any more clearer. I mean, at this point, if you don't get it, I mean, just hit rewind.
Sarah Beth would get so aggravated that some of the things that people would say that were not accurate at all. And she'd say, did you actually watch the whole podcast, or did you just get a snippet?
Yeah, I'll come for you in those comments. Like I won't.
Well, write us, and Sarah Beth and I will sit down and try to answer them to the best of our ability. We're not in a panic mode, but we're in a concern mode. So let's get this thing worked out, get it all behind us, and let's talk about the good things. Let's talk about the history of the sport, how wonderful it is, and let's make sure we've got the foundation shored up for a great future.
Absolutely. Sounds like a plan.
What would you say to everybody out there, Sarah Beth?
Say, what would Forrest do? Be a Forrest in this generation.
I like that. So I'm going to say goodbye. Sarah Beth, tell everybody goodbye.
All right. Goodbye. See you guys next week.
I like that. And I'm going to say God bless you, and we'll see you next time.
House needs painting, grass needs mowing. Where's he at?
Hi, this is Hank. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me your name and your number, and I'll get back to you.
He's gone fishing.